States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ask for approval of the February agenda. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes. Motion passed. Okay, introduction of guests. Okay, approval of the minutes, please. So moved. Second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Okay, now introduction of guests.
We do have Nancy Miller here this evening as our track coach, and we're going to be giving an award to Nancy here shortly. Prestigious award as she was named one of 7 people in the United States for, she's named the Mid-East Sectional Coach of the Year for girls track and field. So we're going to have an award resolution here shortly and have a nice award for her. We have a resolution.
Okay, all right. Already, treasurer's report.
Item 4.1 is approval of January financial statements and investments as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
May I ask about GE Capital Bank? It says maturity date was 10/26/13.
Just an error in typing.
Oh, okay.
They're in order. They're 60.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
And item 4.2 is approval of January expenditures in the amount of $1,295,185.79 as presented.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? I had one question. The Metropolitan Education Council. I've never seen that before. Check 66360.
Yeah, I know what it is.
It's only $514, but I've never seen it before.
It's who we do our cafeteria stuff. You used to see advanced purchasing before. Now we go through that. That's like a consortium for purchasing.
Okay.
Actually, we had a resolution on it for half the year last year when advanced purchasing went out of business. So you've only seen it once before, actually.
Any other discussion?
The one, the Morning Journal, where it says helpful there. We have to pay for those. Is it like for coach or teacher?
Or whatever, yeah, bus stops, or whatever we've done when we...
Even if they put it like on the, say if it is for a coach, they put it on the sports page.
Well, not when it's on the sports page, when it's in the classified.
Just
And how many lines, and we pare it down as much as we can. So.
I wanted to know about 66381 to the United Athletic Booster Club for scoreboard advertisement. $775?
Yeah, every year. That's in lieu of money that they did not receive because we took it in as advertisement when we did all those contracts. So every year we give them what they lost because those advertisers are coming through us on the scoreboard instead of advertising in the scoreboard, the program itself. And they are still advertising the program. So.
I thought that was kind of high for us, the school board, to be advertising.
Yeah, it's sort of taking it back out of the advertising fees we're taking in. But yeah, it's not the school board itself. You are right.
Any other discussion?
I have one more question for you, Kathy. Since the minimum wage has gone up, or
Has it?
Well, I don't
That
know,
was
they
just
talked about
That
it.
was a federal
They've talked
contract.
about it. The federal minimum wage is supposed to go up to like 10.10 or something like that. Steve and I were just talking about it before we came down. We weren't sure. I mean, I looked online today because somebody had told me that, and I couldn't find that it has actually been
Not
official yet.
officially yet. If it does get official, they're going to have to pay our students more.
There'll be some rules and regulations on it. I imagine that will be part of it. Students will probably not be at the highest. There'll be a little lower rate, but it's a considerable increase. It's from 7.75 now to 7.95. But we'll have to see when that actually comes. But like I said, I looked for it today and I couldn't find it, and it actually has. Although somebody told me that they had heard of it.
I would like to see the nature trail fund in 2030.
So it's the second line on that same sum. I'll find the page. What is it? Page 4.10, and it's the second line down.
I don't usually charge that, but it would be nice if they would use for part of it.
Get that committee.
There's a
going,
lot
yeah.
there that could be used for science classrooms, and it needs to be used.
Well, that's the money came in the trees.
The trees, yeah.
I have one question too on 66411 Bogan sites. And it says roof repairs, and it's like, oh no, what happened?
Yeah.
They broke.
Yeah, we had somebody from the roof and Tom asked them. Maybe
Yeah,
let
I
you
think
answer that.
the roof over the gymnasium was leaking. They had to come out and patch the roof.
Not the new roof.
Nothing.
You think we'll see more of that?
Well, we got a leak in the elementary today. They're coming out tomorrow.
Well, this year with the buildup up there, it's probably going to show up more
We're going to find
because you're going to have water that's standing there and draining off. Any other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, superintendent.
Item 5.1, this gives me great honor to present Nancy Miller with this award. It's a very prestigious award. Only 7 people in the United States are receiving this, as Nancy has been selected as the U.S. Mid-East Sectional Coach of the Year for 2013 for girls track and field. Congratulations, Nancy.
That's very nice. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve here at United. Really, it's been a great experience when you get honored for something that you do anyway. So I appreciate it.
I'd like to add maybe a discount. This is actually a progression of awards that started off with 2011, where Nancy was named the District Coach of the Year, originally nominated by Diane Crumpack of South Range. And from there, she went on to be named last year the Ohio State Coach of the Track and Field. And from that, was eligible then to be considered and selected for the Sectional Coach of the Year, which represents the states of Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. So many I had to have it written down so I didn't forget them.
Some big cities with some fast people walking.
And I think that what's particularly special about this award is that it comes from the ranks of fellow coaches who are out there, and so the people that she's beat have respect for her enough to nominate her for this award. So that's
I try not to say that too many times. I try to keep that low, but well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, as a board member, sometimes sports is the thing we get the most calls on. And I can proudly say that I have not received one coach about anything. I mean, everything that we hear is was fantastic.
I handled it before it got to you then?
Yeah.
So that's good. That's good. That's a plus too, you know. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Thank you. It's a beautiful plaque. Beautiful.
I'm sure all our daughters have, if we've had daughters, have been coached by Coach Miller in track, but what I found from my daughter being with you for 4 years is how much fun she had, as well as working hard. Those girls are inspired by you. And
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Like I said, it's a privilege to do something that you love to do, and being honored for it is just kind of, I always call it a byproduct. That's just kind of a byproduct of doing what you love to do and trying to do it the right way and trying to put things that should be at the top of the list at the top of the list.
How many years have you been coaching now combined?
This will be my 28th season. I was 10. I started at 23, so I was only, 4 or 5 years older than the girls I started with, but I started when I was 23 as a head coach in Salem, and I spent 10 years there and resigned when Maggie was born and took time off, 7 or 8 years off, came back here.
Then you saw the light and came south.
Well, actually, I actually came back as an assistant
Okay.
because I just couldn't stay away from it. So I came back as an assistant, and I spent 8 years as an assistant here. The opportunity came up, and Bernie moved over to the boys, and I moved up to the girls, and so this will be my 10th season as the
How many
the
trips
girls'
to the state have you had in 10 years?
I've had 6 here in a row, and I had 4 at Salem.
In the county meet, how many times?
It's funny that, 6 out of here and several in there. I actually, when I put the stats together, I did a lot of homework to try to get stuff from my 10 years at Salem, but when we had the house fire, I lost all that stuff in my attic. So once again, that showed me that kind of stuff really wasn't important. It really wasn't. So it's just been when the TV station, our student TV station, did an interview this week, and it's kids, asking you questions. So it's kind of fun. And he said to me, the young man said to me, Coach, it says down here you've got 168 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie. How do you feel about that? And I said, you mean about the 1 loss and the 1 tie? Because I remember I remember the team, I remember the tie. And he goes, no, not that one, the other. So, but that was, there's been a lot of good memories, and not too many low points at all. So, it's been wonderful.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to say, Nancy, Kate ran track for a couple of years, and she was no star or anything, but it was a life changer for her, and you had a big impact on her as far as she still runs. She's still not very fast, but she's still, and you've instilled that in her.
It's a life skill to acquire. It's gonna make you healthy for a long time. I've lots of girls say that. That's one of the first things they want to say to me, honestly. But I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Nancy also attends all the Booster Club meetings, and she is very instrumental in bringing the preparation program that we have for spring sports. So not only does she look out for the girls' track, she looks out for everybody. And how many athletes do we have in the spring training program?
We have 55 average on Tuesdays and Thursdays doing that NST training. And we clean out the cafeteria every Tuesday and Thursday to do it. So that's no fun, let me tell you, but that's the room we have, so you do what you have to do. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
So item 5.1, approval of the resolution honoring Nancy Miller as presented.
So,
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Chestnut?
yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes, I think it's Mrs. Stewart.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your voices are too close there. I'm going to have to put man, woman, man, woman. I apologize. Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 5.2 for your approval to continue admission, the inter-district transfer of students, attachment B.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I was just going to raise, is there any, rather than do this each year, should we just make it a policy and revisit it from now on? Or is it
If
something we
we're
want
required to do every year or not. We'll have to look into that. I'll check on that. when we get back to this.
Roll call?
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle? Yes. Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes. Motion carries.
Item 5.3 for your approval of the 2014-15 United Local School Calendar and Attachment C as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have something I'd like to share. In the future, I'd really appreciate if the committee could consider putting at the end of the calendar where it says makeup days in June. Maybe we could look at President's Day or a day or two after Easter. To have makeup days in June is counterproductive. And I think that when you put at the bottom of the calendar, every makeup day will be in June, that doesn't give us much leeway. So if we can reword that from now on, I think it would be beneficial for the kids. In the state of Ohio, I know they're going to hours from days, but the state of Ohio is also known for changing their mind a lot. Used to be 10 days, went to 5, went to 3, went to 0, back to 5. And today, I think they gave us a couple extra days. But 2 of those teachers have to come, right? Okay. So I just think it would be worthwhile to look at that on the next calendar.
Whereas a lot of schools are doing that.
Yes.
I've noticed that a lot across the state.
And I think when you really look at that, you know, a lot of people, and this maybe isn't important to some of us, but a lot of people take off right away when school is out. And if you've got extra days that you might have to make up, it doesn't work. I mean, we have kids leaving, don't we, the next week to go to Spain?
Sure.
So I would just like, I'd appreciate if the calendar committee could look at that again sometime soon.
What's it, 4 days? Do we have any makeup days?
Right now, we have 10 days. We had 5 Calamity, and then we've continued with the blizzard bags. So we've got 10 days so far. With the House passing the 4 days, it still has to go through the Senate before it's signed for passage. We would be okay with that.
And did the state give us an extra week for testing?
They did move the testing back 1 week, so we've already made accommodations for that.
Yeah, because being here in June doesn't help us.
No, it does not.
They actually emailed, I don't know if it's Chris Morgan, but it showed that the extra days that they allow for testing in the evenings. Roll call?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
No.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Item 5.4 for your approval of the policy update for our one-to-one technology. When we passed this last April, it wasn't formatted to OSBA. We had them look at it to make sure it was meeting E-rate accommodations, and now they've updated our policy through OSBA that will meet those standards.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I just have one question. On page 514, when a student, there's other things that can happen to their laptop and they get strikes, but suppose a bottle of pop does pour into their laptop, do they get a substitute laptop while theirs is being repaired, especially if they have an online textbook?
Yes, we have 10% purchased extra for that. If it's going to be more than a day before they get their laptop back, they can one swap and swap out.
Have you had many reach the straight three?
No.
Have you had any interesting things happen to the web housers?
I think that we've had several of them. The most common problem is a keyboard problem, whether it's a key that wasn't working or something along that line. And Chris the Finch has become very, very good at quickly switching out a keyboard and putting it into the laptop. That's covered under warranty. We send those back. They send us the key.
Roll call?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Item 5.5 for your approval of the unpaid leave as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Item 5.6 for your approval of the certified resignation as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
No.
Motion carried.
Item 5.7 for your approval to employ the certified substitute Kevin Phillips, 24-year Navy veteran, to help us out in that particular position for the rest of the year.
So moved. Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Is he also teaching anatomy?
No.
No.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Mr. Phillips is here if you get a chance to shake his hand. He's sitting here in the back, bar ragging inside.
If you don't mind, I'd really like to thank the superintendent and Mr. Young for having the faith and confidence of bringing me on board. I appreciate that.
Item 5.8 for your approval of the supplemental resignation as presented.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 5.9 for your approval to employ the certified substitutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Item 5.10 to your approval to employ the county certified substitute as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Item 5.11, I believe that's amended with the extra blue sheet because we added an additional person in the custodial area. So for your approval to employ the classified substitutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Item 5.12 for your approval of the community volunteers as presented.
So moved. Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Item 5.13 for your approval to award the 2013-2014 supplemental contracts as presented.
So moved.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Motion carries. Okay, go ahead.
Does Chris have an assistant for the junior high girls?
I've been working with Mike to try to get all the names. I don't think it's completed yet. Item 5.14 for your approval of the volunteer coaches as presented.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Motion carries. Anything further for the superintendent? High school president.
Item 6.1 is the approval of donations, and we have one here. It's $300 to the principal's account. This is from various student service groups that donated money toward our internet safety and cyberbullying program that we held in December. So I'll ask for that to be approved as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 6.2 is the approval of student activity or club, and this is Haley Anderson, who's a freshman, has proposed the start of a new student club to be called the Builders Club. And this is a club that she came up with the idea. She's actually here. Haley, if you want to stand up and come over this way. A volunteer club for students who meet periodically to get together and talk about bullying or how they like to stop bullying, or just a place to get together and discuss the issue of it. She brought this to Mrs. Raymond's attention. Mrs. Raymond agreed to serve in a volunteer capacity as an advisor for this. So we just need to, as a board, approve and recognize this as a club.
So moved.
Second.
Any
Thank you,
discussion?
Haley.
Yes.
Good job.
Great initiative. Very good. Roll call.
I apologize for not seeing which was the second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut? Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Thank
Motion
you.
carries.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you, Haley. Item 6.3 is the approval of the softball fundraiser. This is Coach Burt, who's requesting to sell community savings cards during the month of March with profits benefiting the softball team.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Is this similar to the football cards?
Yes.
Roll call.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Item 6.4, informational items. I know that we have a basketball game going on over there this evening. It's the first girls' tournament game. And so those are listed there unless you have any questions about them. There are some highlights and a number of students who've been successful in different venues for you to take a look at. But I'll leave that. And also item 6.5, the notes on professional development, your first.
Thank you. Since Mrs. Hughes isn't here, 56, we will skip over those and go to, or do you want to highlight something there?
Just one thing real quick, attachment A. This is the monthly staff report for the principal's account. And if you look down to where we had the first 3 blizzard bag days, and that is the 27th, the 28th, and 29th of January, and you can see the number of page loads that we got, 877, 599, 467, significant increases, so that we were getting a lot of traffic on those days where kids were going online to find out what their assignments were. So this is kind of an interesting report that I get once a month that shows students.
And Bill, was this a lot of junior high since high school had exams?
It was, as a matter of fact, the first day is the highest with 877 because high school students got on there just to check and make sure they didn't have assignments that were added there. But we didn't add assignments for those high school students because they were in the middle of exams and closing out the semester for that. But then once they realized that their assignment was to study for their exams, it was the junior high students who kept coming back on the subsequent days.
And you did a great job juggling exams, too.
I still wonder if we're done with me.
And I'm sure if any of us have any questions, Mrs. Hughes, contact her.
I'd like to make a comment
Okay.
for the elementary. There was a group of teachers that went for, was it a reading? I'm not sure how it's titled, but I heard really good reports, and even had one of the teachers ask me to stop in so she could share. And it was a good time, and they brought back a lot of information.
Alrighty. Transportation report. I guess we have to pass out a motion for the transportation report.
So moved.
Open second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
Motion carries. And now we're... Tom?
I got the time. I brought some things in to show you guys. We've had a lot of steam leaks. So we've been spending the last couple Saturdays redoing some steam leaks down in the tunnels. What's happening to our pipes in the school? They're getting real thin on the bottom. See that? Real super thin. That's what's happening to all the pipes.
Is that in the oldest part of the building?
This is actually in the 55 room right out here. We've had a lot of pipes. The threads are bad. We've had major steam leaks. So a lot of this stuff's in the tunnels, as you guys can see. Last 2 Saturdays, we've had to cut a hole in the floor. It shows that in there. Cut a hole in the floor, put a steel plate in. Okay. Then the next Saturday, we went back in and replaced all the pipes. You can see the estimate there for $7,900. I think
I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
this. I think we had about 600 in total there. So,
We are so fortunate that we have people that can repair it right on staff.
and that's not the end either. You know. So we're just going to
Well, thank you,
keep
Tom.
repairing.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right.
I just want to say, I loved item number 3. We had snow in January, but we did not have a tornado. Thank you.
Okay, the cafeteria report for
So moved.
moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I will just note that the snow did kill our cafeteria balance, just so you know, and that's normal. Normally January is a large month for us, so that's unfortunate, because we've been doing really well this year. It is what it is.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinto?
Yes.
And just on a quick note, a reminder of this Saturday, the scholarship breakfast.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have nice weather, everybody will get out. Starts at 7 o'clock in the morning.
I know so.
Okay. You're going to be here.
6:30.
Well, I just had you know, said if you want to come at 7, you can.
I'll be in 7.
Okay.
I have to work Saturday night.
It's a tremendous turnout, but I have to tell you, we have almost 100 volunteers to help with it, and that's part of this community too. It's wonderful.
All right, the nurses report for us to review. And I just have one thing here in this email that we got from actually the State Board of Education. They're going to put out $250 million. Last year they only put out, was it 88 million? 88.6 million for grants for us to write. It doesn't say in here, you know, what they could be wrote for, but it says they're going to put out. Did we get any of that money last year?
No, we did go through an extensive process for application and we're not awarded. And we'll bid it again this evening. A lot of charter schools done that.
Wow. Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to go in executive session, and that would be for personnel. 82.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Pick one of them. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinson?
Mrs. Chestnut? Mrs. Doyle? Yes. Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Thank you.